eri tā tangata, he mauri reo, he mauri ora, he mauri ora e.
Horomona Horo speaks with practitioner and cultural consultant Kelly Kahukiwa no Te Arawa Iwi about entering the world of music through jazz musician Stu Buchanan. Starting with the saxophone and then focusing on Taonga Puoro, Kelly shares insights into his mahi of building bridges of cultural understanding through his practice of Māoriori. He gives back to the ngahere with the oro and the whē of Puoro and helps to obtain positive outcomes for ngai Māori. Whakarongo pikari mai.
Nau mai kia hau manu e.
Ko te piko o te mahuri koia te tipu o te rākau. He rito tangata, he mauri oro, he mauri reo, he mauri ora. Tēnā tātou katoa e te whānau, e whakarongo mai ana ki tēnei o ngā whiti ngā kōrero i runga i te purangi. Ko Horomona Horo tōku ingoa, tēnei au ka mihi ake kia tātou. Nō reira, mō tēnei kaupapa, ko te rere atu, ko te rere mai o te reo o ngā Taonga Puoro o hina raukatauri, o hine putehue, o hine moana mā, tai atu rā ki te whakatīnanatanga o tāwhiri mātea, tāne mahuta, tanga roa mā. Tēnei te mihi ki ngā mārei kura, ki ngā whatu kura, o tira mai te ao atua ki te ao tangata, nei rā te mihi ake kia tātou. Kia ora rā e te whānau. Welcome to the podcast series of Haumanu Collective. I am humbled and honoured to be a part of this kaupapa of Haumanu Collective in having these whiti kōrero for all the whānau around the motu and around the ao to hear kōrero from our practitioners, from our kaiwhakatangitangi, from our manu tioriori involved in the world of Taonga Puoro Māori. And tonight we are humbled and privileged to steer the waka to Te Tai Tokerau, to the far north of Aotearoa, and welcome to our whiti kōrero practitioner, musician and artist, he mana tāne, a brother from another mother. It is a wonderful privilege to welcome to our whiti kōrero, tēnā koe rā e te hoa e Kelly Kahukiwa.
Tēnā koe te tuakana, mauri ora, ngā mihi atu ki tēnei o ngā kupu. Ko whareki hia i mua e tātou nei, kia parata huarahi, kia pai ai te kōrero, kia pai ai tēnei te whakawhiti whakaro e pānei ene o ngā taonga. Engari, he tēno mihi tēnei ki te oro tuatahi o te ao. Rā ko i o masua kore, he anō he mihi nui, he mihi whakahoki kia koe e hoa i tō whānau.
Te ngā mihi e hoa. It's a wonderful privilege to have this opportunity or this particular way where Taonga Puoro practitioners from all around the motu and around the ao can actually have a time just to whiti kōrero, to have a discussion in and around Taonga Puoro. Haumanu Collective was initiated by our predecessors, the likes of Dr. Hirini Melbourne, Dr. Richard Nuns, Papa Te Poro Malcolm, Papa Bruce Gregory Ma, who through the revitalisation of our Taonga Puoro opened up this doorway of Taonga Puoro and the many facets that comes with it. And in amongst the journey, I know you've done a lot of things with Taonga Puoro in your journey of life. And so just to let the whānau know, e hoa, no hea koe, I ahu mai koe I hea. So where are you from and actually what started your journey with Taonga Puoro, brother?
Tino pātai a tēnei e hoa. Me hoki whakaro au ki te ahunga mai a tēnei o te whānau Kahukiwa, hua no he momo taku tēnei, o he momo pātere tēnei no mātua Ngāti Whakaue, hua no, me timata mai pēnei. ana i runga hi tōku taumata ko ngongo taha. Ka titi ro whakararo ki roto rua nui a kahue i henga. Ka tuhunga hua ki te motu a tini rau i tō tāpehia i te kawa ka whakaripo ki te ia ki o hau. Takarawa ki roto iti ki te ahi e i henga. Tuki ana rā toku hoi ki ngā toi o kere maurawa. Tahurere i te awa tapu i ka ki ngā huka wahi i te rea e taku tai atu ki te kūrei o te ihu o tama te kapua e koko ia e arahe. Ko utuhina te awa, reri atu ki Rotorua nui a kahu kei reira, ko te ukai pō, ko wahini mutu, i tupu aki au kei reira ki te pā o Ngāti Whakaue, ko Tūno Opu, tēnei mihi atu, ko Tai o Tū, tēnei mihi atu, whakawhiti atu ki ngā whā ruarua tūhoi, ko tēnei ahu mai, tēnei te kahukiwa mai waiohau, hua no ko patu hiuhu, te hapu, he mihi nui ki tēnei o mātou nei o ngai tūhoi, Ngāti Whakaue anō, engari whakawhiti ki te tai rāwhiti, ko te aitanga maha ki tēnei e mihi anō ki a koutou, ko te whānau haronga, ko taku nei kuia, ko Māora haronga no rotoa o Mangatū, tērā momo wahi ko maunga haumi te maunga kei reira. Hoa no, ka hoki mai au ki te ukai pō i ahu mai au i roto o Hinemutu. Hoa no, ko Ngāti Whakaue tēnei, mihi atu ki a koutou. Engari, noho anau whai atu ki tēnei o mātou, pēnei ihinga ki te nota, ka noho ki whāngarei tēnei wā. Ki konei, ki te taone nui he wāhi ko te ahi pupurangi a ihinga, ko tēnei te ingoa tūturu o Whangarei Town Basin. Hua no, ko tēnei te Māori, i whakatēnā atu ki au nei, ka haramai ki kōnei ki Whangarei. Nō reira, he mihi nui ki a koe, ki a koutou hoki te hunga kaiwhakarongo. Mauri ora. When I was at Kura, actually, I went to a school which was called, we got told to call it Maireho because it's actually called Maireho. But 99.5% of all those akonga that Kura called it Marihau. And when I first went into my Kura Reo Māori class, we had this tūhoi fella and his name was Ollie Olsen. Keep called to after school was my kaiako. And I just went in there, I was a bit starstruck. And I was like, oh, far out, Ollie Olsen's our kaiako. And the first thing he said was, make sure that you are part of the 0.5% that goes around the kura and calls it Maireho. So that was my introduction really into te taringa Māori again, you know, because we grew up in Ohunimutu, moved to Christchurch and sort of started to lose our reo. And yeah, and so being a Maireho, this fellow from Te Kuiti, his name is Stu Buchanan, and Stu Buchanan came along as the Puoro teacher. Gee, he a tāhua tana reo. So he was a sheep shearer Pākehā fellow from Te Kuiti who hung out with other Māori sheep shearers and was fluent in te reo Māori. So and I thought he was Māori actually for years. And so he was this fellow who ran he's into Charlie Parker. He was into John Coltrane. He was into Stanley Turrentine. And so every weekend I started to get my schooling with this fellow. He had this place called the CSIM, Christchurch School of Instrumental Music. And at that stage, I was just transitioning out of being a rugby league head, changed into being a rugby head, played for New Brighton Rugby, played for Parklands Rugby League, and had an accident on the side of a milk truck where my driver drove me into a power pole and crushed my ankle, so I couldn't play rugby anymore. So luckily enough, I had done a few lessons with this fellow at school, and he said, oh, okay, well, you're meant to play music. So I started the transition out of rugby mentality, you know, every single player in every team, all the number 10s, all the number 12s and every team worldwide pretty much. And went, he momo wā tēnei. So instead of knowing those, I started to learn about all these heavyweight musicians of the world. So it's kind of an introduction into improvised music, into jazz. And he always told me, don't ever forget about your own music, your puoro. And I remember he had a little tutu on the mouthpiece, and he said, you can make your mouthpiece sound like, these puoro that come from Te Ao Māori. And I didn't really take too much notice, but the seed was planted, and I remember going back to Rotorua one day and just seeing this really cool as pou whakairo in the middle of town, of Tūtanekai, playing this like saxophone, bro, instead of playing, I suppose it's supposed to be like a putorino, but it looked exactly like a saxophone. I was like, oh, far out, there's the tohu right there. I'm meant to be playing saxophone. I'll just come home and, he uri tēnei ngā hopi a tūtane kai ko au tēnei. And I suddenly started to click for me. And not long after that, I went to this party where Wairere, Iti was there, and another saxophone brother. And everyone's just getting a bit drunk, but he was in the sort of another lounge room having a jam with this brother on the piano, and he was playing some puoro stuff. I think he was playing a kōwauwau. And I was like, oh, far out, I've always wanted to have a jam on one of these. This was like when I first moved to Tamaki, sometime around 1997, I think.
Hey.
And that was really when I first actually sort of had a play on this kōwauwau, and he kind of left it there, and no COVID, so you just go and have a little jam on whoever's other goobies on there. And I started to get a sound out of it like pretty quickly, and I was like, oh, far out, that's cool. And then I noticed that other people came to have a jam later, and they were getting just air out of it all the time. So I sort of thought, oh, maybe it's because I'm a musician. I might have, this might be something for me. So I started to, just started to go down that pathway of like, exploring it out a little bit more. And then one day this fellow in the Navy goes to me, because I joined the Navy not long after that. He goes, bro, do you know why you can play those Taonga Puoro? And I said, you tell me. And he's got real big lips, this fella. Hoki Walker, his name is. Kia ora, Hoki, if you're listening. He goes, it's because you've got a sad heart, bro. You can only play them if you've got a sad heart. I was like, hey! But he's kind of right, though, because I just realised that actually compared to those kind of happy-go-lucky Navy mates who are just out there rocking all the time, I kind of had a real contemplative, kind of more melancholic kind of part of me too. And I noticed when I play puoro, it kind of was getting invoked. So I thought, this is a rongoa actually for me. So anyway, bro, that's just leading up to the start of it. Transition from saxophone, and then moved into how puoro kind of works and how it comes from our whakapapa. And, of course, going through that whole journey, meeting James and learning more about Hirini. I'd heard of Hirini before, and I loved his āhua of his kōrero, but I didn't realise the impact of what he'd done with that ropu, the haumanu at the start, and those people like, even Sana Murray and people from all around the motu who had this impact. And, just learned a lot through James Webster, actually. And he kind of like even invigorated me a little bit more, because I was thinking, bro, where's our rhythm? So that's still part of my kaupapa. I want to be part of us as a collective, to be gifted our rhythms from our brothers and sisters in Te Wānanui Kiwa sometimes. So yeah, that's an aspiration. Kia ora.
Yeah, well, you said it right there, is the journey is never a straightforward one. Coming from, one of the epicenters of Taonga Puoro, in a way, being Rotorua nui a kahumata momoi, te Rotorua, where te motu tapu a Tinirau is, and one of our most recognised pūrākau being Hinamo Rawa ko Tutanekai, and there are songs that have been written over the ages of, ko te ko wauwau I whakatangi here Tutanekai kia Hinemoa. And you have the descendants of those two that are alive today and that are spread all over, not just Te Arawa and Rotorua, but all around the world, that continue that legacy of that story in turning it from what was once thought to be myths and legends. And so the descendants of all of our tūpuna recreate or create the continuation of our pūrākau, of our stories, of our puoro. And then, because I think I'd heard of you when you were jamming Taonga Puoro in the Navy, because around that time, I was in Ātarangi, and we would go to different marae, and one of the marae we went to was the naval marae up in Auckland, and I was playing Taonga Puoro at that stage, and heard of this dude's name, Kelly Kahukiwa, who played Taonga Puoro for the Navy and shared that wānanga and kōrero. And in my journey at that time, I was like, whoa, there's people in all areas with Taonga Puoro. This is awesome, because like yourself, bro, I'd heard of Hirini Melbourne and Richard Nuns and the impact that they were having, and because I was still learning about things Māori, the impact that it was having on the next generation of not just musicians or artists, but the next generation of Māori, of New Zealanders, of people living in this country, because of our really rich and challenging history in Aotearoa. And so in that whole journey, you know, we tend to come across Taonga Puoro in some awesome ways. And so, you know, hearing your story with Wairere, you know, jamming the saxophone, that's, you know, the connections that we have and reconnections that we have in amongst the people we meet, the people we are brought up with, and our inspirations of those from the last generations. One of the things that I've noticed with you over the years, bro, is the depth of your wānanga that you have and the story that you have with Taonga Puoro. So in terms of like where you were heading to at the end of your kōrero there, is where do you think in your journey at the moment Taonga Puoro is heading for you?
Ooh, kia ora, bro. That's a really beautiful lead-in, actually. All the kōrero that you just shared really is, first of all, I don't get to really have these kind of kōrero, you know, like these whakawhiti kōrero that often with, you know, like you and I are busy in our own worlds. So it's nice to catch up when we do have these, and it's like almost like we're trying to cram in quite a big, huge, massive iceberg into a cup sometimes, you know. And I guess, you know, to look underneath that iceberg, I think is first of all where I can see where it's going for me. And it's always been, I think a lot of people say this, I've never, even though I'm a musician on different Pākehā Western world disciplines, and I love them, I don't see for me the Puoro having the same kind of role musically as that. For me, it actually adds the depth of the iceberg for the other things that I think lie on top of that. So it's like I started playing the saxophone, I started building the roof without building the foundations. So when I started integrating Puoro into my life, I realized that was the foundations of oro and of whē that I didn't really have before. So I'm constantly just trying to strengthen my foundations, and I use it at the moment. Well, first of all, I help. Today I was with a ropu. I work with people online. I work for Mauria Consulting, and we do just online wānanga with people, different companies, and we're trying to get really good outcomes for ngai Māori by working with, let's say, a table of people who are the head decision makers in a company who don't really know how to transition the pathway for Māori to come through to be the ones who sit at that table. So as we're talking about co-governance is not easy. So I use Puoro in that space to actually help those people at that table to realise everything about us that is from wairua depths as well. So they can actually start to feel who we are, and they can resonate something inside of them. So I always think that when these Puoro start going, they start activating a different construction of basically how our cells are configured as Māori is different how the cellular construction of someone who's non-Māori is. And we're not the same as people from India, for instance. And I believe that Puoro has a big part to play with that. And I believe making those bridges back to te ao whakapata, te ao nehera, to keep making that bridge of sound, to go back and start retrieving some of those taonga from Maira no, bringing them back in slowly, making sure we're culturally safe as we do it too. We don't want to bring back stuff that's from a time that's supposed to stay in there, but I believe the Puoro does that. So I'm constantly checking myself on how the Puoro are doing that and building bridges back to the past in my own whakapapa and slowly bringing back those little bits, and I get to examine them again. And I use a practice called mā ori ori to do that, which is this fella came around to Te Ataringa. I was at Taipari up on the North Shore, Taraki Pai Whenua. I was at Te Ataringa there, and one of the kaumātua was invited by his moko who was in the course with us, and he said, Koro, can you come and speak to our class? And he came and had a beautiful talk, and he said, this word Māori is, well, let's just say that some people think it's a colonised word that's been put on top of us. But he said, I'll ask you this. There are Māori throughout Te Moana Nui a Kiwa. Did the colonised people go and colonise every single place and call everyone there Māori? The ones who are in Māori? I was like, oh, that's interesting for Kāore. He said, do you know where I think it comes from? It comes from this word mā ori ori. Ori ori meaning resonance, not just lullaby, but actually the resonance of sound, and mā meaning purity. So he said that we are from the pure resonance, and the mā ori ori pure resonance. I started to think about that, and I said, I actually asked the pātai straight up to him. I said, and I had a bit of a hidden kaupapa inside of it because I was thinking about Puoro. And I said, what do you mean by pure resonance, matua? You know, he ata tikanga o tēnei kupu ki a koe. And he said, well, hei te wā, noho au tahara ki te wairere o te waiheke, you know, waterfall, ka whakapā ki au ko te mā ori ori, hei rongo wā mōku. And I was like, oh, yeah, true. True. You know, and we talk about that worldwide, you know, like you go to the ngahere and the pure resonance from the ngahere refreshes, pure resonance from the waterfall, from the moana. So I've always looked at Puoro for me as being a bridge to enhancing the pure resonance, but also for me to give back. So I go to the ngahere and I don't play to people, I go to play to the rākau, those people, to try and give back some of the resonance. So sometimes I take this kauri, and because it's kauri, I figured that it used to be he rākau rangatira kātū ki te ngahere, ki te waotapu. So me whakahoki ia ki te ngahere, kia whakatangitangi atu ki ōna uri, ki ōna moku puna anō, and reinvigorate that relationship. So I look at things like that, and that's where Puoro kind of sits for me at the moment, is trying to have relationships with outside of human beings with Puoro at the moment. So yeah, mauri ora, bro. Cool pātai.
That's the beautiful thing, bro, is the essence of Taonga Puoro. When you hear it in today's world, people see it as music. When you're coming from, you know, te taha ahurea or that cultural lens, it's life. And so part of life is connecting with the environment. Part of life is using the environment for nutrients. Part of life is using the world around you for that nourishment, whether it's tinana, physically, hinengaro, mentally, or wairua, spiritually. And so in that awesome kōrero you just shared, that is the pure essence of, like, as you said, of Taonga Puoro, the stories that we share. When people hear Taonga Puoro, they are the reo, or the hau, or the, as you said, the maoriori of the vibrations of the ihirangaranga to our world around us. And our world interacts with us. It's just some of us have forgotten how to understand the translation in between. I really love the way that you said the kōrero in terms of the oro and the whē. Going back to the beginning of your kōrero and the pure sounds that we make, you know, there was this composition that was made overseas one time, which I had to listen to, which was, it opened me up for many reasons that you just explained in terms of when this particular composer created this composition, he had filled out, he was a famous composer, and he had filled out a whole concert hall full of people. He had a symphony orchestra sitting in front of him, and he went to go and stand on the conductor's space and ready to start his composition. And for his whole show, it was a show of silence. You know, he started his piece and he got the orchestra ready. So the orchestra, before they do their concert, you know, they tune all of their instruments to one another, and everyone was ready and they quietened down, and he was like, cool, composed himself, and the audience knew that he was ready to begin. And as he began, you know, he got into a particular space, and listening to it on the radio, it was really weird because you heard people shuffling, you heard people breathing, you heard people, and you could almost picture people looking at one another, wondering what's happening, you know, and then...
Are you not entertained?
Yeah, and then when it came to the end of the concert, you know, he stood there and then changed his whole persona and bowed. And the audience looked at him, and he got a standing ovation for about 5 odd minutes, you know. And it was the power of silence, because within silence there was a cacophony of sound, you know. And for me, like the kōrero you were just saying was like, when I hear Taonga Puoro, I can hear when Richard Nunza's playing because I know his breath. I can hear when Hirini's playing because I know his breath. I know James's breath. You know, how he plays when he plays Taonga Puoro. And that's how I can differentiate without anybody telling me who's playing the Puoro.
Ai, pēnei a koe, bro.
Yeah, you and I have sat together enough times for me to start hearing and understanding your breath, not to the point that I know the others, but as you said, the oro and the whē. And, you know, it's exciting, bro, because Taonga Puoro isn't just about the music, it's the rongoā, it's the heart, it's a living entity. And that's what I got from your kōrero just now, and reflecting back to the maoriori that kaumātua was talking about. For many, it's like so simple, it can't be true. You know, things have to be difficult You know, things have to be difficult to actually be challenging, but going back to the oro, going back to the fair of things, it is so hard because we're wrapped in a world that is always evolving and always changing. Sometimes going to the ngahere and playing to the rākau, playing to the leaves, hearing your kōwauau underneath the wairere, you know, underneath the waterfall, and actually playing along with the ngahere or the moana. I've done that a number of times, and every time, you know, I've had manu come and kani. I've had crabs come around by my feet. I've had, you know, the interaction is there and they're waiting for us to kōrero with them.
I would just call it, when I'm at there, I call it, you know, sometimes I have te reo tāne hoka going through me. Sometimes I just call te reo waunui. Honestly, bro, I grew up, you know, like I grew up near a lake. And when I moved down to Otautahi, I grew up at a place called Waimairi, and close to there was Parkland. So it was kind of about a 1 mile walk at that time, you know, you didn't really use kilometres. And because, you know, I was born in the mid-70s. So we walked up the road, and it was always the sound of the rolling moana. And I was real East Coast, you know, real East Coast. And I moved up to Tāmaki, far out, lived Takapuna, right near the beach. So always around that. But when I came to Whangarei, actually, the beaches are so ātāhua here, you actually have to drive. It's part of a, you know, it's a real labour of love to get to them sometimes. It's only a half an hour drive, but far out, I used to live 1 minute walk from the beach, bro. You know, and in Takapuna. So here, it's all ngāhere for me. So it's been really interesting and evolving how I view Puoro, because it's really about me having this resonance. And so I have one rākau that I go to all the time as my go-to karakia rākau when I go into the ngāhere, and that's like the waharo for me. There was a time, actually, you know how you've got the Cody cleansing stations there, the Cody dieback, the Phytophthora agathidisa. That's another thing that actually I've been pulled into sort of Cody spaces that I never really thought I would, is only because of that ngāhere. That ngāhere has sort of been opening up doors for me. And I think it's because I actually went and took one of these. I went down to Waimango with Charles Royal and went down to the, you know, Whare Tapiri down there, and these little anga that were down there, there's heaps of them on the beach, eh, bro?
Yeah, bro.
So I actually got one of those ones. I don't even know what you call these ones, but they're taonga from down there, that's for sure. And I buried it underneath the roots of a Cody tree up there, which I call Cody moke because there's no other Cody growing around it. So I did a karakia and put this anga down underneath it, bro, and I basically did some koha to that rākau and try to create this connection with it. And, you know, far out since then, there's been a lot of sort of spaces opening up between Puoro and Cody itself, which wasn't really my intention. I actually thought I was going to try and have a relationship with matai because, you know, everyone talks about this beautiful rākau matai, and there's a few matai in that ngāhere. I found them, I'm like, oh, mean, I've actually found some matai, cool. But no, it's been a Cody kind of relationship at the moment. So that's one thing I'm really into. I'm not looking for any kind of outcomes from that. You know, I just want to literally just go in and have this interaction, and it feels really good for my mauri. So that's a good thing. I think that people smoke cigarettes to breathe. I think they get addicted to breathing, you know?
Yep.
Slow, long breath. I think Puoro has the same kind of thing, actually. If you want to get off the cigarettes, whānau, try and grab a kōwauau. You know? And I think just the whole breathing thing itself, you know, like being a saxophonist and having that appreciation of how beautiful it is to breathe a phrase of music where you have to stop. You know, you can't just sit there going on and on and on forever unless you're a circular breather like a didgeridoo fella, but you actually have to have a pause and a break. And some other instruments are different, string instruments or piano. You can literally play for 10 minutes non-stop if you want to. You can't do that with puoro. So I love the idea that it's actually you have rolling conversations and kōrero just like a human has.
Yep.
So there's another thing around it that I think is really good for our hauoras. We get to speak in a language of manu sometimes. We get to speak in a language of ngangara. We get to speak in a language of wai. You know, te wai e pi ata mai ana, ko te wai ata tēnei, you know. Yeah. We get to speak in metaphor through these to interact deeper with those surroundings. And it's a simple act. It's just a simple act of love, I see it as.
Well, they have that whakatauki, you know, when Hirini, Richard and Brian, when they started working on the book Taonga Puoro, Singing Treasures, you know, one of the people that they would mention quite often is a guy from down Te Waipounamu, Matiaho Tiramorehu.
Kia ora.
And the whakatauki that a lot of Taonga Puoro practitioners tend to reflect back on when we're doing our mahi. And it goes, kei a te pō te tī matatanga o te waiatatanga mai a te atua, ko te ao mārama, ko te ao tūroa. Simply translated as, it was in the night where the gods sang the world into existence, from the world of light into the world of music. You know, and just that explanation you just had, you know, just that kinga just came into my head, because it's the inhale and exhale that allows us to walk the pathway of our own femininity and masculinity.
Kia ora.
You know, whether we are a man walking this oranga or whether we are a wahine walking this oranga, we have an inhale and an exhale and a space in between that allows us to understand the balance and how important that balance is between the two. You know, we have te ao and te pō. You know, when we're in our conscious time and when we're in our subconscious time when we are sleeping, you know, and how each affirm one another's status, how each give acknowledgement to the well-being of our tinana, to the well-being of our wairua. And I love your kōrero about, you know, ko te wai ratarata, te wai tipua, te wai oranga, you know, the story within our wai. You know, because with our wairua, I always give a little kōrero in understanding the potentiality of this thing called wairua, and in terms of not just its spirituality and its translation, but its importance in its context in terms of the two waters and in terms of our Taonga Puoro mahi that we are in. The first wai being us as the vessel that carries the hand, that carries the breath, that carries the warmth of the oranga being te ira tangata, and the second wai being the instrument, whether it is a kōwauau, whether it is a tumutumu, whether it is a hue, whether it is a pūrerehua. And when we connect and become one, and this is where 1 + 1 = 1, and 1 + 1 can equal 3. You know, in terms of, and there are many mathematical or cultural explanations for each output.
Beautiful, brother. I love that.
And so within that is when it's playing, you know, as you're saying, when you ka koha atu te pūpūrangi ki te kauri, i tōna moinga, ki te tahuana aka, and ka whakatakoto nei te koha, mā te wāo anō ka whakahoki atu te koha ki a koe. You know, and so, as you were saying, from the rustling waves of Tangaroa when you were doing your mile walk on the east coast of Tautahi and Christchurch, through to living in the metropolis of Takapuna, you know, and hearing those beaches up there, to being in Whangarei where you have to drive around to Manaia to hear the waves properly, you know, because you just get the beautiful tranquil waters in the bays of Whangarei. But when you go into the ngahere, you know, he ao anō tērā, he tira waiata anō tērā, he tira puoro anō tērā.
Sika, bro.
In terms of the mahi that you do, bro, where do you see a progression of the mahi that you're doing for those keen enthusiasts that are out there, or those that are starting their journey with Taonga Puoro, not just as a musician, but those starting their journey into learning about the whakapapa, learning about the pūrākau? How would, like, if a young wahine or young tāne or young non-binary whanaunga came up to you and they're looking for themselves and they're trying to learn about ko waio, who they are, and they're saying, oh, we heard that you play Taonga Puoro, can that, what can Taonga Puoro do for my journey?
I'm going to be honest, bro. The very first time that someone would interact with me, they wouldn't really understand where I'm coming from, I think, because I'm going to tell you, if that's in your whakapapa, that's yours. Therefore, go spend some time with your whakapapa. And it's just like they say, you know, e tama, whakaronga ki ngā pātu o te whare. You know, go listen first. I remember Stu Buchanan, bro, you know, so he gave me the taonga of this taonga here. And the very first thing he said was, you cannot play the saxophone if you cannot hear the saxophone. And I was like, what does that mean? And I started to understand, you know, that you need to have the sound internalized inside your body first. So he was like, go listen to the same saxophone players. the ones who really resonate. You know, you get that shiver that goes up your back.
Yeah, bro.
Goosebumps out to your arms and up your nape of your neck, and you know you just something's happened. You just had a spiritual experience in 1 second from one note that someone played. Well, you need to go find those Puoro practitioners like Horomona Horo or James Webster, like Hirini Melbourne, like Jerome, like Ariana Tikao, like Al, like Alistair. You need to go start listening to people who are out there playing and they're doing things in different realms with the sound. Internalize the sound inside of you. Like Joel, like there's heaps of people out there. There's so many of these practitioners out there, and listen to them, internalize the sound inside of you, and work out what you like about the sound. I love how you talked about Richard's actual breath, because he sounds like he's an old kuia doing a karanga on the maho. And funnily enough, you know, when I actually really connect in, I feel like I can channel a kuia as well, you know. And you're getting the tangi now, and you realize, why do our kuia do that during tangi? Because they're trying to invoke an ancient part of our breathing system that inspires grief to be released out. So puoro are actually little keys to me to unlock doors of grief inside of people as well. So I would say, if you met Kelly Kahukiwa on the second time now, this is my next kōrero for you, it would be like, now you've internalized the sound and you've had a tutu around with it, do you realize there's a responsibility that comes with these now? So go learn about the responsibility of the puoro. What is that? And then if people went away and started to work out what that was, or they couldn't work it out, I'd sort of just start throwing a few breadcrumbs down, you know. And I'm quite mindful about this. Sometimes we can bring our own whakaaro along, and it might belong to a whakaaro from 1997 or a whakaaro from 2018. And here's someone in 2022 going, but we're in a progressive world now there, Kelly Kahukiwa. I would say, kia tūpato. These here are healing modalities, as well as being beautifully be able to interact with Pākehā Western music and actually enhance that Pākehā Western music now with a level of wairuatanga that it never could ever achieve before. So these are vessels that are holding dimensions of wairuatanga portals inside of them. So be careful. If you're going to use it to try and entice people from the opposite sex, just because you heard Tanekai did that with Hinemoa, kia tūpato. I'd say be careful. Don't make that your goal on this, because I've noticed that that's a fruit that might be appearing at the moment because of online marae such as Instagram, perpetuating desire and a need where people, I think I need to be more Māori to do this. I need to have mata ora to be fitting into this as well. And once people actually are able to get the gift of mata ora, and they're like, I feel really empowered and invigorated now. I think puoro comes to be one of those things that comes down here, he rārangi momo pukinga tā te Māori. So it's yours. Come and take it. Come and utilise it, but just kia tūpato. That's my own personal advice. I believe we need to whakatū ngā momo wānanga of te tāne ki te tāne, wahine ki te wahine, in this realm, to try and teach some tikanga around the same as what we have on our marae tikanga. I think we need to also have these sort of kōrero amongst ourselves to make sure that there's still an old kind of world tikanga that's involved around the responsibility that comes with them, the wairua doors that open up inside of people, the potential doors of grief you may open up inside of someone. How do you hold that space? And also at the end of that session, help to close it off safely with those people. Just be mindful of all these things. There's a power that these things have here, and I don't think we should be using it to entice people into anything else except for rongowa for them. These are actually no te ao Māori. Hua no, he taonga tēnei that has to be protected under Article 2 of the treaty. So we're all responsible for that. Anything else that's been taonga Māori under Article 2 of the treaty has been treated as such. Therefore, we're all responsible to make sure that this belongs as a taonga from te ao Māori, respected as a taonga from te ao Māori, and kept that lineage kept alive as a taonga from te ao Māori.
Kia ora, brother. Well, when we're talking about this thing called taonga, and thus the rongoā or the power or the magic of music. You know, music is in us, music is all around us, and it goes right back to the time of our atua and our pūrākau. And the times that you're talking about, you know, going and listening to the practitioners or the musicians or the music that's out there. If you're wanting to be a player, go and listen to the storytellers if you're wanting to be a storyteller. And so, like anything, also understanding, you know, the depth of the taonga that comes with it. And so with every grain that's grained naturally into the piece of rākau that you're playing in your kōwauau, your putorino or whatever, that's its natural whakairo. And with every whakairo that's actually in a kōwauau, putorino, putātara, it has a story to tell. And you, as soon as you put your hands on it, as soon as your breath touches it, as soon as you hariru it, you actually are creating the next chapter in the story of not only that puoro, but your interaction of your world. And so, ngā mihi nui mo tērā, brother. Before we actually finish up, I have sort of like a kōrero, because I know both you, myself, and other practitioners are out there. You know, we use Taonga Puoro in so many different areas of our lives. And not just, as we spoke of earlier, the interaction of it being a musical instrument. We use it as a modular, as you said, of rongoā. We use it as a tool of connectivity. And the mahi that you're doing in terms of the interaction of the people that you meet within your mahi you're doing, you know, these are building this next generation of Taonga Puoro players.
Kia ora.
Haumanu Collective, which, you know, is all of the whānau that are around our motu that choose to use Taonga Puoro as a conduit, choose to use Taonga Puoro as a tool in their lives to ripple out the effect of this taonga, and as you said, no te ao Māori. So although we have players and practitioners and educationalists of Taonga Puoro that are non-Māori, you know, one of the taonga about it is no te ao Māori. The richness of the pūrākau, the kōrero, and the reo is from the Māori culture.
Bro, it's straight up mātauranga Māori. Is you just look at it when the people say, he aha tēnei mea te mātauranga Māori. Tēnei.
Yeah, exactly.
It's all encompassed, right? You know, so yeah, it's a he tino taonga tēnei.
Yeah. And so within there is, kei a koe etahi kupu mutunga. Tērā pēr no tētahi whakatauki, no tētahi kīnga, no tētahi pūrākau, I ahu mai I roto I a koe, kia kōrero atu ki te minenga e whakarongo mai ana ki tēnei o ngā kōrero. Do you have like any finishing kōrero in regards to the world of Taonga Puoro and the opportunities that we have with Taonga Puoro? But for those that are listening to us at the moment, is there any final kōrero for those, whether it's they're getting into Puoro or they're starting in, they're coming across a challenge in Taonga Puoro, or they're actually loving their space of Taonga Puoro? Is there any reflection that you have in your journey with Taonga Puoro that you could leave with the whānau as a kōrero whakamutunga, as some advice to leave for the whānau that are, loving the world of Taonga Puoro?
Tēnā koe, o ki te hunga whakarongo, tēnei te mihi maioha, te mihi whakahirehire, te mihi rangatira ki a koutou nei. Ai, kua noho mai, kia ata whakarongo ki tēnei, te kōrua Horomona, me te hunga Puoro, I ahu mai mātou I ene o ngā ahurea. This is our generation, so this is what I'd like to say. I've kind of saved this till the end, I guess, is that when our puoro were taken away from us, and when we took on tools of Te Ao Pākehā, and we actually parked aside our puoro for a while, that was just like one of those old VHS tapes, you know, where someone just pushed pause. And they pushed pause at that time, and it's actually our generation right now who are the ones who are unpausing that videotape right now to continue the story of puoro on. So it's a time of being respectful of how the lineage of our puoro was, and also to softly innovate. When I mean softly innovate, I mean if you follow the pathway of whakairo actually innovates slowly, and lo and behold, after 80 years, you get a massive amount of innovation, and that's how Te Ao Māori classical apprenticeships kind of work. So those who are keen, come into it with the whakaaro that actually you're going to help to grow puoro you're going to help to grow it into a beautiful future. It's not a static, fallen asleep art form that sits in museums. People like Horomona are bringing it out. People like Jerome are bringing it out there. It's being put out there onto the world stages. It's being put out there in beautiful waiata places and spaces. Innovate. Here's just an example of innovation. I've gone and made this wheku here, which is actually there's a hole. We don't have our rhythms still. We're still working on that whānau. So it's up to us, ngai Māori, to go and work out how we can start to, te mea o te pā tuki. And I don't believe we should be innovating by ourselves. We need to start creating relationships with te moana nui a kiwa and ask our tuakana how would they like to contribute to us getting our rhythms too. So we actually go back and ask our whānau to be part of our journey. So there's different ways, you can use different ways of innovating some of these sounds, but I'd like to see us as a whānau moving forward and starting to say this is the generation where we start to bring our rhythms and start to amplify it out a little bit larger and slowly innovate there. So I'll just leave that kōrero with us right now and see where it goes. There's an idea too of us looking as a collective of some type of he momo kura puoro mō ngā iwi take o te ao. I'd love to see that we actually innovated an Indigenous music school, but we use it as an exchange point where we get other practitioners from Te Mana Nui a Kiwa to come through and spend time with us, wānanga beside us, and bring their pukinga with us. They take some of ours back with them. We've already had people from Hawaii come here, learn some of our puoro to go back and re-enhance their practices, but we'd like them to come here and share some of their rhythmic practices, for instance. So, he whakaaro, and I just say, if you're not into puoro at the moment, it's not sounding right, tune up your ngākau, tune up your heart, and it'll come out straight away. And I'm not saying that in one of those kind of hippie kind of kōrero. I actually truly mean it. You can't do this unless you have a real connection to the pātuku te manawa. Hua no Māori ora.
I can definitely attest to that last statement you made there, Bray, is it doesn't matter whether you've been playing for 2 minutes, 2 days, or 2 decades. If you're not feeling right, the puoro will let you know by not playing for you. And so you can be on a world stage and everybody's thinking, oh yeah, he's going to play. And then you pick up the instrument you usually play and then it just stops playing, until you've come to your balance. And so ngā mihi nui e hoa, and hei kōrero whakakapi mōku, tēnei au me kira te uri whakaheke o te pū o te wheke, o hokianga whakapau karakia, o tau mārere, e mihi kau atu ana kia koe, e te uri o ngā pūmanawa e waru o Te Arawa, tērā o ngā moana i whakatinana hia i tō tūpuna, ihenga, i tōna oranga, kia rongo ai tātou ngā uri whakaheke ngā pūrākau o mua. Nō reira, e te hoa, e te rangatira e Kelly, tēnei au, a Horomona e mihi kau atu ana kia koe, mai te pito o te ngākau o te whānau o haumanu, kia koe e te whānau o haumanu, kia rongo ai ngā whānau whānui i enei kōrero, i enei taonga o tātou nei. Nō reira, e te whānau, ko māu anō tira, just for all those listeners out there, that's us for this particular session for you. And once again, just an honour to have another kōrero with the brother Kelly Kahukiwa coming from Te Taitokerau, and the beautiful, wonderful kōrero that's happened in this particular session of our Haumanu podcasts.
Kia ora, bro. I love that kōrero. Thank you, bro.
Yep. And so, just in closing whānau, there's a short saying, and the mahi that Kelly does reminds me of it, and it was a whakatauki that I came across a number of years ago, and it's really short, and it goes, hau atu, hau mai, kia rongo te ao.
Kia ora.
And so once again, hau atu, hau mai, kia rongo te ao. And so, e te hoa e Kelly, tēnei te mihi ake kia koutou, e tātou katoa e whakarongo mai ana ki tēnei o ngā reo, tēnei au ka mihi ake kia koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koe e te hoa, tēnā tātou e te whānau.
Ko te piko te mahuri, ko ia te tipu rito tangata